Today we're going to learn about greatest common factor. So before we begin, I want to review what a factor is, because if you don't understand a factor, finding the greatest common factor is going to be very difficult. So a factor is a number that can be multiplied by another number to get an answer. So a very simple example would be if I showed you this multiplication problem. 2 and 5 are the factors in this problem, and they multiply together to get what we call the multiple or the product of 10. So whenever you're finding factors, you're looking for the numbers that multiply to get an answer. So let's practice by finding all the factors of 22. So I like to start by writing my number, and I want to think of all the factor pairs, because we always need to multiply two numbers together. So the first factor pair you always want to start with is 1. Anything times 1 is itself. So 1 times 22 is a factor pair for every number. Then you want to think, what other multiples can you think of for 22? Well, 22 is even, so that means it must be a multiple of 2. 2 times 11 makes 22. Then I'm going to go to 3. 22 is not a multiple of 3. It's also not a multiple of 4. And when I think about it a little harder, there are actually no other multiples or factors of 22. So these are my only factor pairs. So I'm going to list all of them in order from smallest to biggest. So 22 only has 4 factors. I'll do one more example. Find all the factors of 40. So I'm going to start by thinking of factor pairs. 1 times 40 is the first one. 40 is even, so I know it's a multiple of 2. Half of 40 is 20, so 2 times 20. 40 is not a multiple of 3, but it is a multiple of 4. I can do 4 times 10. And it's also a multiple of 5. 5 times 8 is 40. 40 is not a multiple of 6. It is not a multiple of 7. And so since I'm at 8, which I already have, I know that I've found all of my factor pairs. So I'm going to write them in order from smallest to largest. And notice I put commas in between each factor. So these are all the factors of 40. All right, when you find greatest common factor, which is abbreviated GCF, you are looking for the greatest factor that two numbers share. So similar to least common multiple, but a little different. So I'm going to start by listing all the factors of 12. So I'm thinking about my factor pairs. I know 1 and 12 make 12. I know 2 and 6 make 12. And 3 and 4 make 12. This is what we call a factor rainbow. It's just one way to write them all in order. Now I'll do factors of 24. 1 and 24. 2 and 12. 24 is a multiple of 3. 8. And I can also get 24 by multiplying 4 and 6. So those are all the multiples of 24. Now I'm looking for a factor that they have in common. They both have, I'll use a different color. They both have a 1 for a factor. They both have a 2. They both have a 3. They both have a 4. They both have a 6. And they both have 12. Instead of listing all of the ones they have in common, we only want to know the greatest or the largest factor in common, which would be 12. So the GCF of 12 and 24 is 12. Here's another example. Find the GCF of 8 and 18. So I'm going to start by listing all the factors of 8. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. And that's all of them. Now I'm going to list the factors of 18. 1 and 18. It's an even number, so I know that 2 goes into 18. 2 and 9. And 3 and 6. Once you have them all listed, you're going to look for the largest one that they have in common. So they have 1s in common, they have 2s in common, and 18 doesn't have 4 or 8. So the largest factor that they have in common is 2. So the GCF is 2. Last example, find the GCF of 7 and 21. So same thing, I'm going to list all the factors. Now 7 is an interesting number. The only way I can multiply and get 7 is by doing 1 times 7. We call this a prime number because its only factors are 1 and itself. So no other numbers make up 7. 21, I'm going to list the factors of 21. 1 and 21. It's odd, so it is not a multiple of 2. It is a multiple of 3, 3 and 7. And those are all of the factors for 21. This is a composite number because it has more than 2 factors. So anytime you can list more than 2 factors, it's called a composite number. Everything we've been working with so far today in this lesson have been composite numbers. Okay, so even though it's prime, this number is prime, we can still find the GCF. They both have a 1 in common, and they both have a 7 in common. So in this case, the largest number is 7. So the GCF is 7. All right, that is the end of our lesson. So now it is your turn to practice. Go ahead and re-watch the video if you're still having a little trouble.